When we take DMT, which I haven't been taking now, we don't find the words. We're looking, we're feeling, we're sensing. We are trying to interpret, but we don't find the words. I'm sitting on this bench which I haven't frequented in maybe 3 years. And I'll just give you a 360 so you know where I am. One of the videos I made this morning, the first one, the longest one, I made a lot of it in here, and I was speaking about how the litmus test of knowing that one has awakened or is enlightened and that's when we notice the details, people. It's like when we look through a pair of binoculars, we see things much nearer because they're magnified. When we turn the binoculars the other way, the opposite is taking place and everything is equally as far away. And things are tiny, tiny, tiny in the distance. When we haven't awakened, it's like we are looking at the world with binoculars turned in the wrong direction. Things are a million miles away from us. They're so obscure, they're so tiny, they're so indecipherable. When we turn the binoculars the proper way, everything is magnified and becomes very clear. That comes about with a state of consciousness, people. Now, Aldous Huxley wrote a book, a very thin book, a small book and thin, and it was called Through the Doors of Perception. And he wrote that book after he took mescaline for the first time. And Aldous Huxley was a very renowned intellect at the time. And lots of people, many people bought that book. Because he spoke about how mescaline changed his perception. And probably the most poignant part in that book, and I've heard it quoted many times, so it must be the most poignant, and it's the part I remember, is when he was looking down at his corduroy trousers and he noticed the folds and he noticed the clarity of the texture and the material, things he had never ever noticed before. Hence the title of the book, Through the Doors of Perception. And so he went on to speak about the magnified effect of things and the enhancement of colours and a new world that he was experiencing whilst he was on mescaline. And there are many, many ways, people, where we can increase the doors of perception. We can traverse through the doors of perception. And I've spoken about many, myriad, in my videos. And what happens with me in my mind is that, and I'm always saying to you, I'm a collator of information, and I put the pieces together and I present to you like a pretty formed jigsaw puzzle. I don't speak about a jigsaw puzzle only having put the outer parameters in, the corners and the outer parameters, because there's nothing to say, is there? Because the picture isn't depicted. I speak to you about the jigsaw puzzle having put 90% of the pieces in there, and I can see to a greater extent what the picture portrays. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm reading this book, and this book is Sigmund Freud, and it's an old book. It was written 100 years ago, and the title is On Creativity and the Unconscious. And the things Freud spoke about in this book were not included in the main body of his works. He wrote them with pseudonyms and published them in magazines and periodicals and things like that. And it's only been in recent times that somebody has compiled them together under Freud's name. And so this is a very, very interesting book, and I read it, I would think, within 7 years, because it's on my bookshelf, and I've read all the books on my bookshelf. But what I'm doing is, instead of buying new books, I'm going back and I'm reading all the old books. I'm just picking off the old books, because we see them in a new light when our consciousness is more evolved and the doors of our perception have been opened. Because it will never do to listen to our ego telling us that we've already read those books and we know the information. Because we can read books many, many times and extract more and more. Now, this opening chapter in this book, it states, one of the difficulties of psychoanalysis. And in that very small chapter, one of the difficulties in psychoanalysis is the reluctance of the ego to accept what is found. Because the ego hasn't seen it. You have to have travelled through the doors of perception via psychoanalysis or deep study to see these things. That's in the first chapter. The second chapter is titled The Moses of Michelangelo. Now, Michelangelo carved an incredible sculpture, and that is the sculpture, and it's of Moses, but if you look closely you see Moses has horns, because Michelangelo incorporated primal man into Moses. Pan, the icon of nature, the god of nature. Now, in this picture, Moses he has under his arm and his right hand the 12 commandments. The first 12 commandments that he brought down from the summit of Mount Sinai. The first 12 commandments were broken into pieces because he threw them down in his wrath. Because when coming down from being imparted this information from God, 10 commandments, he found all of his people worshipping Baal, the golden calf. And in his anger, he threw the tablets down and broke them. And he had to go back up to get another set. Now in here, there was a very poignant part which I have to find now, because it's very poignant in that it relates to what I'm saying about the observation. Now I'm going to read this thing, and it says here in segment 2 of the chapter: long before I had any opportunity of hearing about psychoanalysis, I learned that a Russian art connoisseur, Ivan Lermiev, had caused a revolution in the art galleries of Europe by questioning the authorship of many pictures, showing how to distinguish copies from originals with certainty, and constructing hypothetical artists for those works of art whose former supposed authorship had been discredited. He achieved this by insisting that attention should be diverted from the general impression and main features of a picture, and he laid stress on the significance of minor details, of things like the drawing of the fingernails, of the lobe of an ear, of aureoles, and such unconsidered trifles which the copyist neglects to imitate, and yet which every artist executes in his own characteristic way. He goes on to say, I was greatly interested to learn that the Russian pseudonym concealed the identity of an Italian physician called Morelli, who died in 1891 with the rank of Senator of the Kingdom of Italy. It seems to me that his method of inquiry is closely related to the technique of psychoanalysis. It too is accustomed to divine, secret and concealed things from unconsidered or unnoticed details, from the rubbish heap, as it were, of our observations. Now, what you said there is that the fraudster, the copyist, only gave the intricate details to the focal points which he knew would attract attention, and the details which nobody would be inspecting, he never gave that much detail. But the original artist would give the same level of detail to everything. And so that's how this person, who discovered many frauds in art, that's how he did it. By looking at the lesser details and seeing that it was very mediocre and very rushed and incompetent and didn't contain the majesty or the genius. So Freud was very impressed by that, because he said that, well, that's very similar to psychoanalysis, because in psychoanalysis we look at the finer details. We pay the greatest of attention to the most seemingly insignificant of things. Now, as I sat here and I'm changing glasses from my everyday distance glasses, which brings the clarity to the world afar, when I transfer those glasses to my reading glasses, then the distance is very, very blurred and I can't even look at it. But the details close up become very apparent. So I can read this text, and when I'm reading this text in the sunlight, I caught the vision, my eyes focused on a 62-year-old man's hands. And under normal circumstances, without the very revealing light, you know, it's the light. And how many people say, oh, I don't like that photo in that light because it's too revealing. I mean direct sunlight. There's no hiding anything. I'm in the light. I'm sitting here basking in the light, and then I put my magnifying glasses on. They are actually magnifying because under normal circumstances I don't see anything like the details on the back of my hand. But then when I put my reading glasses on to see the fine details, I see how my hand is that of a 62-year-old man. And I have to concede my age in some respects. I'm still muscular, I'm still reasonably fit and strong, but there's certain parts of my body which are now giving way to the 62 years. I've had a very, very good innings. Most people start to fall to pieces at 40 years old, even earlier. I've still got all my hair and most of my teeth. I'm doing fine. And yet, through the doors of perception, I see the reality. I see the harsh reality of a 62-year-old man's hand. And I have a memory of a younger man's hand. I have many, many memories of younger versions. And now I find myself here, 62 years old, 62. I don't feel old, but 62. That's getting there, isn't it? So then when I look at that and I see, without expounding on all the details, like of the swollen knuckles and of the dryness and the wrinkliness of the skin, these are the most weathered parts of me, because the rest of the body miraculously has gotten away with that, and there's only a few tiny little onsets of this happening on other parts of the body. But the hands have always been outside in all the weather, and I've always worked manually, well, mostly, and worked for years and years and years in the building, and I never used to wear gloves. I always used to have my hands out in the freezing cold and the frost and everything, concreting and, you know, lifting and building and all that different sorts of stuff. And there's 1,000 scars on my hands, and they're manly. So I saw that, and then I remembered Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception. And then I read that, what Freud says about the details. And that's after I made the video this morning, which was speaking about the great difference of consciousness between the automaton, the sleeping, and the awakened and the enlightened. Now, to what degree does the awakened and the enlightened bear? How much of a degree is it? Many people can wake up from their slumber to realize that they are not the ego. Okay? They've awoken. Then there's a long, long, long journey before they are going to reach enlightenment. And so that's the difference, people. Being awoken is the first tentative steps of an infant. Being enlightened is a mature adult, metaphorically speaking. We have to have travelled a long, long journey. So, within this book, speaking about this picture of Moses, Freud starts by saying he's not really in the greatest of appreciation for art unless he can understand it via psychoanalysis. He has to be able to reason as to what a person meant by creating such piece of art. Where did it come from? And so, thousands of people throughout the years have debated what was the message that the great genius Michelangelo wanted to convey when he carved this sculpture of Moses and Pan. And of course, scholars, they wax lyrical about this and that, and the way he looked, and the wrath, and the anger, because he just evidently come down from Mount Sinai, from his rendezvous with God, and he got the 10 Commandments to give his people, and he came down and he saw them frolicking with Baal, with a graven image, which is absolutely something that mustn't be done. And in his anger and his wrath, he threw the stones down. He threw the stones carved by God onto the ground and broke them, and wrung his clothes and his hair. He was seething. So people have tried to articulate that. The thing is, people, when you've got someone so genius like Michelangelo, and possibly, I'm not sure, he may have been the first person to depict Moses with horns as the archetype for nature. It's so broad, it's so genius, it's so incredible. So when an artist like that sculptures something so incredible, so absolutely out of this world, every single bit of the posture must mean something. Because the artist doesn't just chisel away, oh, that's kind of like Moses. No, every single hair in the beard means something. It's just so deep, it's so profound. So, this depiction here must be trying to say something which epitomizes Moses and the whole aura that Moses had, particularly when he was caressing the 10 Commandments. So people speak about a wrath and a scorn in his look, how he's turning abruptly away from sitting down casually, and he's clutching the 10 Commandments, and this is what he needs to tell the people. But look what they're doing. Look at how vile and disgusting they are. And then, you can imagine, he's standing up and smashing the stones. So, this is what people think about. And this is what I'm saying is when we enter into an enlightened state. Michelangelo was enlightened to untold magnitude. Untold magnitude. His perception, his insight. The Sistine Chapel the decapitation of John the Baptist. This is so many things, so many facets of his art, with the deepest of meaning and richness. The sun now is being obscured by a huge fir tree, and I want to continue with this video with the sun because it's a little bit chilly. Now I'm going to be reading more from this book because it's very, very insightful. And what I'm always saying to you guys is that if you read these old books, you will learn so much if you have the mind for it. You see, you have to have the mind for it, you have to have the consciousness for it, you have to have the gift. Otherwise it's pointless in you reading this stuff, because this stuff is meant for a certain group of people in a certain vibration of consciousness. Who of you are there? Who of you are there? The details, people. The details. And scientists look for the details. Mathematicians look for the details. Philosophers look for the details. Religious scholars look for the details. Lots of people look for the details. But there's one thing which all of the aforementioned have in common. They are serious about what they do. How many of you are serious about the acquisition of knowledge? How many of you are serious about discerning what you really are? That's the difference, isn't it, people? Because very, very few people are serious. And that's why there are very few people who ever discover anything. And probably the reason why there's so few people who are serious, because there's so few that are genius. And it's only the very genius with their seriousness that conclude anything. And for those of you that really take the time to listen to bygone geniuses, to read their works, and to listen to modern geniuses, to really listen to them, to really study what they say, and try to comprehend what is being articulated. It's fascinating. But you see, you have to become a scholar in certain realms. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to find yourself amidst the chaos. And I mentioned in a previous video, the last Elon Musk Joe Rogan video, which was on the 1st of November, they were speaking about the chaos in every conceivable region. Because superficially, all around the world, it's a swirling soup of chaos. You have to get much, much deeper into everything before you're going to see any level of clarity, people. But the vast majority of people, they don't do that. All they do, like water boatmen, they walk on top of the water. That's their life, that's their two-dimensional life, on top of that two-dimensional plane. They don't go down into the water and they don't go up into the air. They walk on that thin membrane. And that's what most people are doing. And that's why they will never ever reach any significant conclusion on anything, because all they are doing is feeding on the frenzy of chaos. You hear me, people? It's just useless, chaotic claptrap for the better part of it, unless you study what a person is saying and what they've read and what they've written. Sunday afternoon in the graveyard with all the squirrels and the birds around. It's the closest I can get. Now, if you look over here, this is interesting because most people, they don't know how squirrels where they live. But you see up in that tree there, you've got those big groupings of dark matter. They are drays. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got 4 squirrel drays there, and they bend over the twigs and they build like a twig net basket, and then they fill all of the holes up with leaves and moss. It's an incredible work of art, and it's a great deal of work when you consider that they've got, you know, they gather the leaves from that tree, not necessarily that tree. They may have to come down. I've seen them coming down, and they gather moss from tree stumps. And there's one particular tree stump over here which used to have a lot of moss on it, and I noticed that the moss was being harvested. Fungi. So lots of the moss was gone, and when the moss was dry, you could see big patches of it which had been harvested. There's so many squirrels around here. Where are you going, dude? Up there. Is one of those your home? I'm sure one of them is. You see, people? And in there it's nice and cozy. Well, don't inhale your beer, people. Swallow it, that's what you're supposed to do. Okay. It's a little bit chilly. I'm satiated with the length of time I've been out. I've read my book for an hour in the sun, and I meditated for an hour. And that has been enough for me. Now, in here, there is another dray. You see that one there? So squirrels will either live in old woodpeckers' nests or natural holes in trees, hollow trees, or they'll build their drays. And it's an incredible thing. I've never actually seen one. I've never actually seen a video of anyone catching any squirrel building a dray. You see them online filling up nesting boxes, like we watched Gifty. We see them doing that, but the mastery of building a dray is something exceptional over and above that. And I would absolutely love to be able to see that. Well, enough, people.